this? Manic-depressive Pixie Dream Girl by none other than Katya Zinn. We have them here today. Oh my goodness. I'm particularly excited about this book because we've been working on it for a while. It's been a long time coming, and to actually hold it here in my hands, I'm sure Josh too, is like, it's a little surreal almost. And I'm also just super stoked because it is an incredible book. And Katya is truly going to blow you away today. I don't want to take up too much time. I will put a link to the book in the chat for folks that haven't ordered it yet. Please do yourself a favor. You are missing out. I mean, come on, this is a book. This is a full length. Look at this. This is a beast here. So no more shenanigans though. I want to give Katya an introduction, let them read from this incredible book, and then we will do a little bit of Q&A as we typically do. But with that, Katya Zinn is a Boston-based, LA-born and raised performance poet, educator, and activist. Their first chapbook-length collection, Human Verses, was released in 2021. When not shouting poems to mostly strangers at local dives, she works as a teaching artist and equity director of a children's education nonprofit, where she's working on starting a scholarship program to provide free therapeutic mentorship in the arts to neurodivergent children from low-income backgrounds. No big deal. Zinn is currently the self-appointed poet laureate of Chuck E. Cheese, but hopes to make the title official as soon as she gets Charles to respond to one of her tweets. Manic-depressive Pixie Dream Girl is her full-length collection. Whilst writing it, she, in a manner reminiscent of a film noir detective pinning yarn to a wall of photos before he loses his badge for being too close to the case, created the following visual aid. I'm going to show it here for folks that might not see it, this Venn diagram. This is so freaking cool, and I am so glad that this made it here in the back of the book, I'm just going to say. Created the following visual aid, then proceeded to annoy her editor, Josh, about it until he finally agreed to put it somewhere in the book. And with that being said, I am going to give the floor to Katya so they can bless us with a reading. And I'm going to spotlight you really quick. All right, please take it away.
Hi. So, sorry, I'm just noticing that we lost Ariana, and I have a text from her saying that she was having trouble finding the Zoom link. So I should not be doing that right now.
I'll figure that
out. Be instead reading from my book. But yeah. I am gonna start with the dedication, I think, because I feel like that sums up pretty well what the overall vibe of the book is. So it goes like this. For every man who's ever called me an adventure, this book is for you. Like the dent in my forehead is for the bathroom cabinet. Like capitalism is for systems of oppression. Like mass media is for perpetuating them. Which is to say, it is not for you. Without you, it might not exist, but it's mine. You can't have it. And this is weird. Like performing to like a digital space because I keep like thinking to wait for and then nothing's happening. So I'm sorry if this reading is a little bit awkward. This is not like the medium necessarily at which I excel. But yeah, so the next poem that I'm gonna do is called A Former Gifted Kid's Guide to Channeling Your Inner Chaos into Productivity. And this poem, I think is pretty important to me, but I don't do it a lot just because it's very long. But I think recently, especially, which I'm grateful for, there's been some more discourse in educator circles about this concept of gifted kids and whether that's in fact the healthiest label to place on a child during their formative years. Because I think from my own experiences and the way that I try to operate, like pedagogically speaking, I guess, is to try to, praise children on qualities that are not assumed to be static or fixed. So like complimenting their like perseverance, their resilience, like, oh wow, I can see you worked really hard on that. I love that. Like, I love how original that is, how creative that is, as opposed to like, you're talented, you're gifted. Because if you look at, where gifted kids are now, they're either like doctors or they're mentally ill. Mentally ill alcoholics. Was in the same gifted program as a kid that I went to elementary school with, and in the same rehab. So that says everything that you need to know. Okay. So this is A Former Gifted Kid's Guide to Channeling Your Inner Chaos into Productivity. 1, keep marshmallows in your glove compartment. 2, a 9x12 spiral bound calendar in your backpack. 3, tell yourself you're single by choice. 4, tell yourself it's your choice. 5, fill that calendar until you have no other choice. 6, who needs a date when you have 365 of them on you at all times and 0 free time? 7, don't take self-care advice from anyone who had pharmacy brand marshmallows for breakfast on their way to class this morning. There's no academic accolade for learning the difference between worth and utility, depression and laziness, artistic process and savage perfectionism. Creation and destruction are not opposites, but parts of a whole. Self-destruction is just creativity we can't let escape us till it's good enough. The only time I've looked good enough is in my reflection on trophies. The closest I get to self-care is reasonable assurance I'll survive myself at my most destructive. I read somewhere marshmallows get their gelatinous texture from ground up horses. And isn't that the same as self-care? Pressurized violence repackaged as sweet, soft comfort. The eating habits of an unsupervised 8-year-old at a birthday party feel like self-care, or at least like accepting starvation is not, and it feels like self-care. This liminal existence disguised as acceptance that nothing I've ever wanted to keep seems to last very long, and it feels like self-care. This game of how bad can I make everything before I make changes. This game I'm playing with myself, but still manage to be losing. And it feels like self-care to overthink, to bar feeling, to keep moving, to bar thinking, and keep moving the bar to self-acceptance above every success till I catch myself sobbing into a Smirnoff Ice on a Wednesday afternoon because suddenly I have to drink both to numb myself and to feel anything at all. And isn't it ironic how quickly the things we do to stay alive become the things stopping us from living? Once, I survived a November fortnight on pills, cigarettes, and waxy festive chocolates gutted from one end of the Trader Joe's advent calendar in my passenger seat, reduced to decorative cardboard shell and bereavements of plastic, still wearing the bottom half of a shipping envelope tattooed in my mother's handwriting with an address it never saw past the mailbox of, because 8 home is just a place where you sleep a few hours a night with the TV on, knowing you'll be washed clean of this place by morning, knowing you can scrub yourself like dry rot from the baseboards when all the stillness and the silence you've left waiting at the doorway crashes forward all at once, like days full of chocolate into the dashboard at a sudden stop. The self-care I need is learning how to properly use a calendar, to crush time between my teeth in digestible fragments and take it off of my shoulders, to let go of being gifted and learn to be present. Look behind hollowed out yesterdays, missing sweetness destroyed within my head, and see time is not marked by empty places, but windows to a background illustration I'm seeing more of every day, and I have so much left to unpack. So many nutritional decisions to regret, so much life to tear and bite and swallow before I could even tell you what it could be. All right, so this next one that I'm gonna do has a bit of a story to it. And that story is that I got this absolutely unhinged email not that long ago from a guy that I knew in high school, where he was like, oh, I like wrote this story about you. And, you know, I've spent the last 4 or 5 years hating you. But then, you know, when I was doing research for this story that I was writing about you, I reread all of your texts and I realized that, like, you're not actually this cartoon villain that I worked you up to be in my head. And in fact, maybe I was a little bit in the wrong. So I guess I'm sorry. Also, I'm smoking cigarettes on a beach in the middle of the night. And like, maybe if I'd done things better, then like I wouldn't be smoking all alone. And the thing that he thought that, you know, I was this cartoon villain for was that he sprung on me 7 years into being friends that he was in love with me and he wanted to move to Boston for me, like from LA, wanted to move to Boston for me. And I was like, hey, maybe don't do that. And then I told him, you know, don't come to my house. He came to my house and I didn't let him in. And yeah, and then he got really mad and said some like pretty hateful shit. And it was really interesting reading about all of that from his perspective, like I have to say. And also just really frightening. Like there's a scene in it where like he fantasizes about like my car, like me dying in this like flaming car wreck. And there was like sexual assault that I experienced that I had like confided in him about, that I found like one of his notebooks where he'd like taken notes on it because he wanted to like incorporate it into the story that he was right. Yeah, just like really unhinged, disturbing behavior that was upsetting. And the most upsetting part was like I felt bad, you know, like I felt like I was being the dick. And I think my theory, right, with all of that, because I feel like in order to process things, I need to like contextualize them into some like larger statement about society so that it's not just happening to me, is that, you know, we were raised on all of these movies about the Manic Pixie Dream Girl, and what's really convenient about her is that she doesn't actually exist. And so you can just project whatever you want onto her because it's a two-dimensional space. And like, you know, you project two-dimensional images, it's a hologram, it becomes three-dimensional, but the other half is just all projection. And none of those characters, like when you really look at the dialogue and the choices and, you know, their personalities, like none of them have a role outside of like helping this like sad sack fucking protagonist achieve self-actualization. And I think that it was a really like rude awakening for him that I was like a whole person, which I don't think that he's like still necessarily 100% understands. But yeah, I feel like, you know, life imitates art, art imitates life. It's all a circle. Anyway, I'm going to stop rambling. But this is an erasure of that story. And the story was much longer. So the blackout parts have been shortened, but all of the words are his. So this is called Erasure of the Short Story. A guy who I'd been friends with since high school wrote about how I made him a monster by not reciprocating feelings. A chapter in our turbulence, us, impossible. I described how he saw a girl unconscious, had desire. That nightmare I had hoped you could see was fucked up, body damage. It was drama you used. It went well with crooked smile, a nice slice of cleavage. I want to make it clear that those are all his words together and I didn't write that. Intent of wardrobe choices, not innocent. You take the act, days later, book I read, wham. My carcass proudly hung, a display. I guess the insides of the broken were where you discovered your process. Applied it for a piece that's shit. You talk about she's been through a lot, empathized with instability, I, metaphor, like wild horse, broken, galloping, in rehab, doing well. You called it sobriety cult. I talk and you invent dumbass things to hear. Stories like, I always loved my millennial Sylvia Plath. 7 years, I believed it friendship, not failed attempts at courtship. There was history. We told each other our problems. You know, proof rock, the poem that spoke to us. For Christ's sake, it's not about love. H.R. Geiger, the artist weirdo you're blown away I knew about, I showed you, but okay. Her leg pressed against mine with a firmness that was surely no accident. This is reaching. Fantasyland's crap. I hadn't expected a kiss, tense, tension, not same. You think it's a fucking fairy tale, a movie scene. Love's a drug. The analogy is apt. I can't do drugs. I'm addictive. And you buy them in times I can't leave and it's fucked up. Dream girl, you called me. Then write scene in which car on highway ignites in flaming wreck, me driving. Manic Pixie Dream Girl becomes bitch. Heroin withdrawal. I am stupid, selfish, ex-alky, stock character. You were my friend, 7 years, but no guarantee anything built will last. Only old dead writers who smelled of cigarettes embrace this ending, this ambush. You aren't bohemian. Like Orwell, Hemingway, Miller, those dead bastards eat ass. You love a thing to possess. I'd never be the life you needed. I don't know what I did to become the monster. Perhaps I just... Okay. So this next poem I'm gonna do is called Open Letter from a Background Patient at Arkham Asylum. And it was basically just a reaction to how, like, after the Joker came out, all of a sudden everybody like wanted to talk about PTSD as if that's the example, you know, when there are tons of people who have PTSD and live with that every single day and like don't shoot anybody. And I don't know, it's just this really interesting corner of the internet, the like men that feel seen by that. Because if you feel like that's a depiction of you, like you should be offended. You should be offended by like the implication that you're, you know, one sexual rejection away from becoming a fucking murder clown. You know, like that should disturb you. And yet, I don't know. I don't get it, but it sure does annoy me. So here's a poem from a background patient at Arkham Asylum who is also like mentally ill but hasn't murdered anybody. To everyone watching the movie about the former patient now calling himself the Joker, ask yourself if we really needed another movie humanizing a violent man. Do you think we aren't all shackled to this linoleum silence by the ghosts of violence too? A violent man speaks of trauma, and you call it origin story. I speak of trauma, and they call me blame externalizing. Ask me how we sleep, with orderlies' flashlights screaming into our eyeballs every hour. Ask me when I last saw sun, or tasted air that didn't burn chemical in my lungs. Outdoor time is a level 3 privilege. Count bars of sunlight through the bars on the windows. I tried to leave this place once. 3 night nurses pinned my arms to the bed rail, stuck me. I woke up purple, wrist to elbow. They say it's only been 3 days. Like I've not counted every fluorescent sunset since they brought me here, but time is packaged different behind these walls. Here, time comes in ovals and capsules in 2 straight lines, 1, 2, 3 times, then bedtime. They scour the hollows of our cheeks for non-compliance. Everyone says the worst part's the screaming, but it's the going quiets that keep me awake. Overnight, they go dead-eyed from defiant. I am so tired of important national conversations about mental illness and trauma, spearheaded by some murder clown whose masculinity is so fragile it crystallizes blades at every abuse. Does he think he's the only one who's ever been made less than human? And what of us, who turned the knife only inward, who kept our softness safe behind scar tissue? There are patient files fattened every day here by the echoes of violent men. Why does he deserve an excuse? Ask me how many of us have been the victims of someone else's origin story. Ask me about the battered ex-wife, of the bastard who stabbed his next wife, who at trauma shares in plastic chairs a clock cried, if he really loved me, he would have killed me too. Ask me about Annie in 2B, who was an activist, who keeps to herself, and a photo of her dog Jack next to her bed, who joked about losing feminist credentials when she went back to him this time. Just listen, please. Why won't you listen? He needed help, that was all. He needed someone to hear him. He only spoke with his fists because nobody listened. Nobody listened to his feelings when he was small. You see the danger now in making sympathetic narrators from violent men. Did you see me? Well, they paraded your protagonist through the buzzing set of doors, doubled over in what the white-coated clipboards call a pseudo-bulbar affect. They didn't give me much screen time, but I've been here all along, hunched over dry markers in this insult to art and rooms they call an art room. I've been working on something for Annie to hang next to her dog. It says feminist credentials at the top in bright purple marker, and at the bottom in red reinstated. Be my witness. I will leave this place. I will feel sun on my face again. I will hear rain, and I will live to see this age of violent men washed clean from our streets. Ever heard of a story like that? And if you did, would you listen? All right, I might do 1 or 2 more poems, depending on where I'm at with time, which I've been paying characteristically 0 attention to.
Do 2.
2? Okay.
Yes.
All right. This one is called A Minor Notes. My first piano recital, I played Mozart, wore black velvet, my hair in a French braid almost long enough to sit on. Mr. Gevorkian had a funny accent. The scent of his sweat and cologne clung to the living room days after a lesson. When I hit my notes wrong, he'd squeeze the offending digit under the thumb of his dominant hand against the lump of his knuckle like he was popping a grape, shake the arm attached up and down till I cried. He never did the same to my brother. Never asked him why. Mr. Gevorkian said crying was for babies. He yelled when I flinched at his hands. In my first grade journal and my best printing, I wrote, "He is a nice man, but very sticked." The day he walked out on a lesson saying I had talent but couldn't be taught, I wrote my first concrete poem in the shape of a great big frown. I hate myself. I hate myself. I hate me. I hate myself. I hate me. I hate myself. I hate. And looking back now, I'd call it banal, needlessly repetitive without artistic justification. My first piano recital, I wore black velvet. I played Mozart, but Mr. Gevorkian didn't like my hair down or when my clothes showed too much leg. They will look to the long blonde hair or they will look to the leg. They will not hear you play unless the note is sour. My first piano recital, I wore black velvet. I played Mozart. And that was the first time I remember wondering if I'd always be looked at before being seen. All right, and this last poem that I'm gonna do is called After Zelda Fitzgerald, the original Manic Pixie Dream Girl. And what's really interesting about Zelda Fitzgerald is that nobody really knows anything about her. Like, she's mostly known for being F. Scott Fitzgerald's wife. But there were like so much of his work would not exist without her. And the fact that she isn't remembered is by his own design. And like, I remember reading The Great Gatsby, you know, and of course, like, it was like a transformative book for me because I thought that the writing was so beautiful and it, like, you know, left a major impact on me in like a very complicated way now, looking back at it. But I just remember there was this like line where Daisy Buchanan, she says, she's talking about like possibly having a kid, and she says, I hope if she's a girl, I hope it's a girl, and I hope she's a fool, because that's the best thing that a girl can be in this world, is a beautiful little fool. And like, that always kind of stuck out to me as like an uncharacteristically like three-dimensional line from a character that, like, by all appearances was completely flat, like completely two-dimensional. Like, she's characterized throughout the book, like she has no, in action, she has zero complexity to her. She's just this like hot, selfish person who doesn't really have any layers that you can see. But that line always stuck out to me as like uncharacteristically like perceptive for the character that Daisy is portrayed as. And it turns out that that was a line from Zelda Fitzgerald's private journal, and he fucking stole that and fed it to Daisy Buchanan. And that's why, like, disproportionately, she says this thing that he wasn't able to back up with the rest of her character because he had no idea how to write women, because he didn't see them as people, except for like this one line that he stole from Zelda. And like, that was really interesting to find that out so many years later, because I specifically remember like reading it and being surprised by that line. Anyway, so this is for Zelda. Did you know that F. Scott Fitzgerald invented the word orgastic? It's true. His vision of Gatsby's imagined future stretched thus far past confines of prescriptivism. He birthed this bastard child of orgiastic and orgasmic. Despite being remembered mainly for marrying one of the greatest American writers of the 20th century, Zelda Fitzgerald was an artist in her own right. Accomplished dancer, talented actress, gifted writer, motorcycle enthusiast, certifiably bad bitch. Committed to a psychiatric facility in 1930. Her legacy, according to Wikipedia, includes the semi-autobiographical novel Save Me the Waltz and the diagnoses hysteria and paranoid schizophrenia. Unmentioned is the entry in her husband's journal plotting her psychological destruction as a means of ending her career. This is a direct quote. Attack on all grounds, detach, disorient, probable result, new breakdown. Or her private journals, from which he stole entire passages of The Beautiful and the Damned. Unmentioned, the way he forbade her from accepting starring roles, publishing contracts, spotlights, from existing. Outside the texts, he trapped her between like a flypaper dragonfly, while he plotted open the uncracked spine of an underage silent film star with his influential voice. Called her his muse too, called her his Hollywood dream. Unmentioned is the letter he sent to Zelda in the hospital. We're going crazy and calling it genius. You know, crazy is just a word men use when they mean inconvenient, when they mean you have delusions of independence, when they mean I've never made anyone orgastic and now it's your fault, I have a complex about it. If F. Scott Fitzgerald is indeed one of the greatest American writers of the 20th century, perhaps the etymology of violence begins here, with women remembered by the abuse they endured, and men praised for seeing hard definition as invitation for their craft. Zelda Sayer Fitzgerald died in 1948 in the fire that swallowed Highland Sanitarium. She could not escape the flames because they chained her to the bed. Today, there is a museum in the ashes where it stood. Some say the walls still whisper Zelda. Some say it smolders in the dark. The way every femme they call crazy is a fire refusing to be put out. The way every femme men fear is an endless, burning thing.
Wow, Katya Zinn, everybody. Are you serious? That was freaking incredible. Oh my God. Thank you so much for that reading. Seriously. I want to do a quick Q&A before we let you go for the evening. So folks, if you have any questions, I have some curated questions, but I like hearing questions from the chat and other than stuff from my own mouth. So if you want to put them in the chat, please do, and I'll be happy to ask. But with that in mind, just to kick it off, I actually want to jump to the very back of the book and talk about this really cool Venn diagram that's in the back. It's very blurry, so I apologize for my camera, but when you have the book, you can check this out. But it's a really cool Venn diagram that has all of these aspects of what you talk about in this book. And so I'm curious of like when in the process of writing your book did you start working on the diagram, and then how did that help you to like build the narrative arc of your book, because it's almost like an outline of sorts, and it's really cool.
Yeah, I would say it was like midway through the second draft of it. I mean it was absolutely like a yarn on the wall, like everything is connected moment, and I was doing it and I was like, this is either insane, like I'm either like insane right now, or I'm like onto something and I don't know which it is yet, but like I guess we'll find out. And
I think it's the latter.
And it started really because people kept asking me like, what's your book about? And I didn't know how to answer them.
For sure.
Because it's about the way that media portrays girlhood and the way that that affects people's lived experiences of girlhood, but also the way that the media portrays mental illness and the way that both of those identities are simultaneously fetishized and vilified, and how all of that ties into capitalism, because mental illness is actually just a construct of living in a society that commodifies our shame and fear. And the privatized healthcare industry was just the market's answer to like the people that it exploited past the point of productivity. And then 2 or 3 minutes into that, people's eyes would sort of glaze over and I would be like, oh, okay, I'm doing the thing again. I'm going on a deep dive, because I didn't have
no, absolutely.
And so I guess that is just a like microcosm of the way that my brain works, is I can't necessarily like explain something to you without going on for a really, really long time. So I'm just gonna draw the shapes of it and
That's
like
great. No, I love it. And honestly, I went to the back of the book first because I knew this was here. And I was like, all right, I'm going to look at this first, and then I'm going to go read the book. And then I was reading the book. It was like in the head having these dials almost. It was like, okay, where are we now? On the chart, right? And like trying to tune it in. It was cool. Like I really appreciated it. I think this is really, really awesome.
I love that.
So with that, to kind of go off of, so with any type of book folks can get what they want from it, right? So I'm always interested with every author. What do you hope, though, that readers take away from the book in regards to these various intersections of capitalism, media, mental health, and gender-based violence that you've so thoughtfully outlined through the course of this book?
I think what I would most hope that people would take away from it is to just change the conversation around and change the way they think about mental health and DSM diagnoses, because I think in the same way that, you know, telling women to carry pepper spray fails to address the root of the issue.
Yep. So.
We're failing to address in the way that we think about, talk about, treat mental illness, the fact that, like, mental illnesses, at least many of them, in the ways that they manifest themselves, in the ways in which they are harmful, are just symptoms of like a greater societal ill.
Right.
So like, is having an eating disorder a mental illness, or eating disorders a symptom of a society that weighs your worth against your weight?
Yeah.
And is our alcoholism and addiction, does that qualify for a mental illness of substance abuse disorder? Or can we change the conversation around that enough to stop asking, like, if you see somebody who's struggling with addiction, I feel like the question that we constantly ask is, what is wrong with this person that they would continue to make these decisions that harm them? And instead, we started asking, what makes a person's reality so intolerable and so miserable that they are willing to cause repeated harm to themselves in order to escape it? And there's such a cultural component of diagnoses that we're missing, because the DSM is taken as this like end all be all. If you're diagnosed with this, that means you're this. And human beings are much more subjective than that, you know? And not only that, but the diagnosis that you get is based on somebody else's bias, and the way that it manifests itself is based on your experience of the way that society portrays it. And one of the most interesting things that I learned when I was doing research for this book is that, and this is the last thing that I will say.
Oh no, that's great.
Is that there is this tribe, the Dagara tribe in Central Africa, and they have people in that tribe who experience what we would refer to as one of the criteria of schizophrenia and other psychotic spectrum disorders. And most like indigenous cultures have people that exhibit these same symptoms, but the way that they handle it is that those people, when they start to show the symptoms, are given like mentorship by the tribe's shaman, and they grow up to become the shaman, and they're considered medicine people, and they're considered healers. And the hallucinations that they experience are most commonly what this specific tribe refers to as good news from the other world.
Yeah.
So messages of wisdom from their ancestors who have passed away a long time ago, or spirits that help them navigate situations and help them heal themselves and other people. And yet when you look at the way that schizophrenia symptoms manifest themselves in like Western psychotherapeutic treatment settings, you know, which are pointed to as being the, you know, only scientific evidence-based model for treating these disorders, people have terrifying hallucinations that tell them to hurt themselves, tell them to hurt other people. And I think that that is because we're just like indoctrinated by all of this media that shows people with mental illness as being scary and being dangerous and being violent, even though that's not true. Like across the board, regardless of what your diagnosis is, like people with mental illnesses are more likely to be victims of a violent crime than to be perpetrators of it. And I think, I guess, to sum all of that up overall, right? It's the things that we, you know, the art that we consume affects the way that we view ourselves and the way that we view other people. And so, yes, these things are just movies, but they're also some people's only means of understanding what it is to hold identities that they don't hold. And when you think of it that way, like, of course we have to be more responsible about the kind of art that we're putting out into the world. And so I think for me, that's something that I feel very passionate about within my own art, that, you know, if I'm going to create something, if I'm going to put something out into the world, I want to make sure that it's something that hopefully people can see themselves in, but that I'm very clear about the connections that I'm making and the message that I'm sending.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. And just thinking about that too, of course, like you also have this whole component of capitalism doesn't profit if you get better, right? So like to add that into it, you know, a lot of this media is to kind of keep that spinning. And I was also thinking too, you know, one of my favorite poems in the book is Pickled, right? That was one of my personal favorites in terms of, because a lot of research hasn't advanced because people have these taboos over talking about mental illness or neurodeviance or what have you. That one was really special to me because, you know, I'm only learning now at almost 32 that I am probably autistic, and my mom just did not want to get me tested, even though it was highly recommended. She just didn't do it. She did not want to see that. And so reading that poem in particular, just the idea that the novelty that people see in relationships or the way they want to project, or how much of this stuff in terms of our societal ills are just people having to mask, right? Or having to just like, yeah, forget about it. This can't be me, right? You know, like, so it's wild. It's really wild. So with that, I want to jump to a question from the chat. Megan just sent this little thing in, and it's, Katya, can you talk a little bit how you see your poetry in conversation or in connection with internet discourse or not? You mentioned it a bit with the Joker in particular, but particularly mental health, gifted kids, self-care. I think all of these are pretty heavily discussed online, but not often but often in some shallow, hot takey ways.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, I'm one of those people that like will go down like just about any rabbit hole, like however gross it might be, just like as anthropology, because I'm so curious about it, you know? And like I want to understand your world. I want to understand the like choices in your life that led you to this position, you know, whether that's like harmless, you know, somebody like putting ketchup on a watermelon, or like incel forums. I think that it's fascinating as like you know, like an anthropological study. And so like that was one of the things that did. And I think I don't know, there's a weird kind of like what you were saying about the shallow kind of hot take stuff. I feel like there is this, I don't know, almost stigma about saying that you like get inspirations from poems off of like, you know, a tweet or like a Tumblr thread, because, you know, I don't know, I always think of like some dude in like a beret and a turtleneck who's like still arguing with his colleagues about whether J. Alfred Prufrock actually ate the peach or if it's like a metaphor, is like sitting there going like, oh, that's not art, like it has to be timeless. And so like I definitely like have those conversations in my head, but then also at the same time, like I think that like we should at the end of the day write about what we want to write about and be able to have a frame of reference for it that integrates, you know, your own experiences with like the artistic and creative process. And so I think absolutely the some of the gifted kid discourse and the Joker discourse, I think a lot of that is important, but I think and was certainly important to the process of writing this book, but I also had to try to distance myself from it, like while actually writing the poems enough to like be drawing my own conclusions about it, because I think things, especially on Twitter, you know, things get flattened very quickly and become very reductive and very divisive. And I think that a lot of times people, and I will do this too, like there's an essay that got cut from the book because I was doing this thing of where, you know, if what I want to say is here on the spectrum of like what's going to be perceived as radical or unhinged or whatnot, if what I want to say is here, I feel like I need to start here so that maybe I can get you like here. And that doesn't always work out that way, because I think more commonly the way that human beings, the way that our brains work, is that when we see somebody that's completely across the spectrum of our views, we become more entrenched in those views because we see that as a threat and we feel like we're being attacked. And I think that's all I have to say about that. But thank you. Great question.
All right, so a couple fun questions here. I am really curious, how did you become the self-appointed poet laureate of Chuck E. Cheese? And I am curious if you could speak more to the significance of the character in relation to your book and the writing.
Yes. So Charles obviously is somebody that's very important to me. And the Chuck E. Cheese poem, like, started from, as soon as I learned that this was an actual, like, that there was Chuck E. Cheese canon, that he had an origin story, I was just immediately fascinated by it. And I didn't know what I was going to do with it necessarily, but I was like, okay, that's a poem. And then in terms of thinking about origin stories with the Joker and with all of these other examples of media that are brought up in here, I think that there's something just really fascinating and very beautiful and sad and vivid about this idea of people's life paths being a reaction to something that they feel is missing.
Yeah.
And so, you know, in the most like silly, ridiculous example, which is this like fictional rat who wants to give every child a birthday party because he's an orphan who's never had one of his own, like, I weirdly resonate with that. Sure. Because there's a line in that poem, every teacher was once taught they were unteachable, and like the truest measure of being is not in what you've had but what you've lost. And I think I like resonate with that in a weird sort of way about why I became a teacher and why I approach my like my work as an educator in the way that I do, because so much of it is trying to be the person that I needed when I was younger that I definitely didn't have, and trying to compensate for all of these really harmful messages and, you know, like greater traumas that I received growing up. And so that, I don't know, has just gone in an entire, like, it's taken on a life of its own. And now, you know, that's the poem that I get asked to do most often.
Really?
Which like always really surprises me, but like
that is interesting.
Also is like pretty exciting. You know, like that's like to the extent that like, I don't know, I feel about like it's the poem I'm best known for, because I don't feel like I'm like known, but like to the extent that I am, and when people are, you know, paying me to come someplace and read poems, and the people there know my poems, and I ask, what poems do you want to do? Almost always it's like the Chuck E. Cheese poem. And that's a poem that, like, you know, people, one of the poems that people like talk to me about the most. And so if there were such thing as the poet laureate of Chuck E. Cheese,
I was gonna say you're nailing it right now. Like you're definitely repping.
You know, I haven't heard from them yet about it, but
they're missing out. They're honestly they got to get on it.
Yeah, you know, fingers are crossed. Haven't quite given it up yet, but
no, that's really fascinating, honestly, like the backstory and everything. I think that's really good. It's really, really interesting. So Josh had a question, but I'm gonna give you one more and then we'll bounce to Josh. But I am curious. So there's a poem in this book, it's called Hit. And you talk a little bit about how you used to get into this game of sorts where you would over time somehow convince men you were hanging out with to, if they would ask you to punch them in the face, and I thought that was like, it was hilarious but also very poignant, like most of the things in this book. And I couldn't help but like this was honestly one of the first questions I thought of, because I read this book and I was like, ooh, I wonder if Katya could punch any sad boy from any film that featured a Manic Pixie Dream Girl. Who would it be and why?
That's absolutely the best question I've ever gotten in one of these. So thank you. And 100% hands down Scott Pilgrim.
Okay.
And I feel like he is the type of dude also that would be pretty easy to convince that was what he wanted.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I fucking can't stand that movie. Like, I cannot stand it. I think he's like basically a sociopath. Like if you watch it with any grounding in, like, I don't know, like I find it very hard sometimes to, like, with movies where there's these like fantastical elements to it, but then it's also like, these are people, and if you look at that and that was a real person who was treating people that way, who was like stalking this woman that he just met, did not know, while being like basically like emotionally abusive to his actual girlfriend that was just madly in love with him, that he treated like absolute garbage. And then like that's the hero of the story, and like he gets to win in the end. And also that she has some like chip implanted in her brain, so that literally like the Manic Pixie Dream Girl in that movie, she has like a chip implanted in her brain that her ex-boyfriend is like controlling her every move. And I feel like that's just,
I hated that they did that because that's not in the comics. It's very different. It's weird, but I totally agree. Honestly, in my head, I was like, it's either Scott Pilgrim or Joseph Gordon-Levitt from 500 Days of Summer. They're up there.
yeah,
I totally understand.
Both very punchable. Both absolutely people that I think I could convince to not just let me, but to ask me to punch them in the face.
I think Michael Cera in real life. It is possible. But hold on. All right, so 2 more questions. One from Josh, and I'll give one other. But Josh was curious, how was the publication process? How was working with your editor? Not me. I know I'm great. In parentheses. So we're talking about.
So yeah, with this book, I would say it was a wildly different experience than my last publishing experience, because I felt like, you know, this time around, I was like working with a team of people that like understood what my stuff was about and like wanted to help me convey that in the best way possible. And I think just having somebody else's eyes on something is incredibly valuable, but also just an incredibly interesting experience, because I think a lot of times the lines that other people respond to are not necessarily the lines that I would expect. And the lines that I feel like are really, really necessary are often just overdoing it and overstating a point that's already being made. And so going through with, and I just loved, like, it gave me such excitement and joy that my editor was named Story. Like, I just, I would tell everybody that with just like the most, like, you guys, like, you're never gonna believe what my editor's name is. Side note, fascinating Wikipedia article rabbit hole to go down: nominative determinism, people whose professions reflects their names.
Okay.
Like Raymond Mahfood is like the secretary of like food and agriculture somewhere. That's the only one that you can think of off the top of my head. But Usain Bolt, you know, famous runner, fascinating. Sorry, that
that is
not at all relevant to the question. But I mean, it actually sort of is, in the sense that, like, I think our brains worked very similarly, where like we would go down these like random tangents and were like able to connect on a lot of levels, as far as like the ways that like the things that we had in common, and the ways that those like came through in the book. And I had one more thing, but and that like it was helpful to not have to feel like I had to play a character, I guess, like in some, you know, professional settings or like career advancing things, like, you know, and like I will be real about it. I'm just not an especially like professional person. Like I swear a lot.
No.
I say weird shit. And like I can be Blazer Katya if I need to, you know, I can like keep it in. But like it's just not comfy. And so feeling like I was like, you know, being seen as like a human being, and not just as like a commodity, I think was a really good experience.
Oh, absolutely. And I totally agree. Forget all the prestige crap. It's all garbage, and they're also all shitty people. They just try to hide it behind their faces. So with that, I'll give you one more question before we close out for tonight. And when I was wrote this, I was thinking of the first part of the book where you're pitching a more honest Manic Pixie Dream Girl movie. And so I was curious if there was one particular film featuring a Manic Pixie Dream Girl that you could rewrite, what would it be and why? And to add a little bit to that, because the other part of me, I was like, well, maybe there's one that you would just wipe off the face of the earth. And what would that one be?
I think I'd go for the classic 500 Days of Summer, because I feel like that's the one that the most people, like that's the most quintessential example in most people's minds, of like my generation anyway. Maybe before that it was like Garden State. But I think I would rewrite it so that you know, Summer felt like a real person, and B, that he wasn't rewarded at the end for like the ending. And Joseph Gordon-Levitt has come out and like tweeted this, that like, you are all misinterpreting the movie. Like this is not, he's not supposed to be like the hero of this story, and the ending is not actually a happy ending, because the ending shows like, if you haven't seen it recently, the ending is like he's, you know, in some office waiting for a job interview, and then he meets somebody and then immediately projects all of his hopes, dreams, and insecurities onto her, and then she introduces herself as Autumn, and it's like, we made like a weather joke, but also like he hasn't fucking learned anything.
It hasn't changed. Yep.
Has not changed one bit. And so like people can say all they want, like, oh, it's just everybody else's misinterpretation of the movie, but like if everybody's getting the wrong interpretation, then I think there's like some rewrites that could be done, where honestly, if it was just told from Summer's perspective, or if it were told alternately from both of their perspective, I think that could be really interesting, because I think if it were genuinely a movie that he learned something from it, you know, then I feel like all of the weird stuff that he projects onto her up until then would make sense as, you know, this like hero's journey, I guess, of like the mistake that he learns from, and like learns how to be a better dude, and learns that ultimately like nobody is going to fix him, and that just because he has projected something onto somebody doesn't mean that they're responsible for it, and like went to therapy maybe.
Yeah.
I think that could actually be a really cool movie.
I would agree. Oh my God. Well, thank you so much, Katya. Seriously, this book is so incredible. And also, I just want to say you did a great job with the format. I know the virtual stuff is weird, especially with this book. There are so many beautiful lines. There's so many gut punches, and it's so funny. Like there are so many funny parts. So I could imagine not hearing people like have some sort of reaction. That's a bit weird, but you did really well. And I'm so excited for the tour for you and to see where this book goes. It's really amazing. Thank you to the folks that came out today for this. It was recorded, so we will put this up on YouTube when we have a chance. But other than that, just give some love for Katya in the chat. And that's it, folks. That's all she wrote. That's another show. You know, not too bad, right?